I thought it was interesting. Well, I didn't do it with my AI. I just did it.
In your head.
See those memes online of like people saying they're talking to AI and they're just thinking. Have you seen this? Like people dunking on those people. I did that. I talked to the chatbot in my head.
Oh, okay.
Hello, De Niro Nation, and welcome to Our Hero De Niro, the only podcast watching and recapping Robert De Niro's entire filmography in random order. I'm Mike, joined as ever by my co-host Mike.
No relation.
No relation indeed. And today we are so excited to be celebrating our 80th episode together and with all of you, loyal citizens of De Niro Nation. Mike, how are you feeling 80 episodes in?
I'm feeling good. Yeah, I feel like we've settled into a nice groove. I feel like the quality of the episodes has been pretty high lately. There have been a lot of great episodes lately, and there are so many good De Niro films left to go in this podcast project that we've been doing for so long. Oh God, it's been going on for so long. But no, I think it's been great. And I'm excited about all of the new citizens of De Niro Nation who are joining us every week. And I hope that they will check the backlog. And, if this is their first episode, or maybe they came in recently, check out some recent great ones like Las Vegas, Freelancers, What Just Happened, Amsterdam, Goodfellas, Heat. There are so many good episodes in the backlog at this point.
That's such a good thing to call out. Yeah. Mike and I monitor with some interest, as I'm sure folks can imagine, our general listenership. And to Mike's point, it does grow week by week. So please, if you're new, we're so happy to have you in De Niro Nation, and lots of good episodes to go back and check out, certainly including the ones that Mike mentioned, but there are plenty more as well. So thanks for being here with us, guys. I, too, am feeling really, really good. It's so funny. I really enjoy thinking about the way we open these decennial, as it were, episodes that we do, because we reflect every time in a way that I think is both gratifying as well as inspiring as you think about kind of the human condition and progress and improvement. We make this comment at the beginning of every one of our commemorative episodes that we really feel like we're getting into a groove and like the podcast keeps getting better. And I totally agree. These past 10 episodes between our 70th episode recommendation station and today have really been exceptional, and I'm just so glad to see our progress and so proud of the work that we're doing.
Oh, I feel like we've been in a groove for a while now.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. But like it always feels, every time we reflect on the last 10, it always feels like the last 10 have been so great. That's the way that I felt for the past 4 of these. It's nice, isn't it?
Yeah, it's nice. It's all good.
So today, we are going to do a new type of episode. I was trying to think of a way to do a kind of quasi-awards show that was a little separate from the Roberts and other kinds of those recognitions that we've done for special episodes in the past. And careful listeners, here's a great episode that you can go back and check out if you're new to the podcast and haven't heard it. But in our episode from This Boy's Life, Leonardo DiCaprio's feature film debut, co-starring alongside Robert De Niro, from a few months ago, will recall that I opined during the recap of the film that I thought that Robert De Niro's character, Dwight Hansen, would win the award for smallest penis among any characters Robert De Niro has depicted on screen. I stand by that, even with the intervening films that we've seen. And I did say, I think in the produced copy of that episode, that I thought it would be fun to do a Superlatives award show, most this, etc., about characters De Niro has depicted up to this point in the podcast. And so that is what we are doing today. This is episode 80, Superlative Summit. Mike, are you excited? You got your categories all locked in?
Yeah, I think the problem with this premise, this idea of yours for your 80th episode that you're hosting here, is that I've made the definitive choices for all of these categories. So everything you say will be rendered, totally useless, because I'm coming in hot and I'm coming in correct.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's up to citizens of De Niro Nation. Why don't you write to us at mike@ourherodeniro.com. Really about this or any topic. We love getting letters from you guys. And let us know after you've listened to this episode whose picks you think are more authoritative, mine or Mike's. It'll be a great topic to get letters about. Well, let's open with our founding category, which is the Smallest Penis Award. I have already described it as being Dwight Hansen. For those who don't recall or haven't seen This Boy's Life or listened to the episode, Dwight Hansen plays Leonardo DiCaprio's abusive stepfather with a certain pathos that I think suggests he's got a real small man syndrome to him in the way that he engages with others in the world, especially those whom he sees as smaller or inferior to him. And so I think that Dwight Hansen has the smallest penis of any Robert De Niro character whom we've seen on screen. What about you, Mike? Who do you have pegged for smallest penis?
Yeah, it's really funny. Our This Boy's Life episode was 12 episodes ago, so I totally forgot that entire conversation and the genesis for this episode idea, because newer citizens of De Niro Nation should know that every 10 episodes, one of us gets to pick and lead the special episode that breaks format. So this is entirely Mike's episode. The categories are his. This is his baby. And yeah, I mean, I obviously picked Dwight Hansen as well. I think it's very funny that you're leading.
That's so funny.
Well, I don't know, you're leading with a category that like is so obviously going to be one specific character. So there's no opportunity for disagreement here. But yes, I agree. It's got to be Dwight because he's incredibly insecure. He punches down, as they like to say in the stand-up comedy world, and he has a very brittle masculinity. Where he's not like, Robert De Niro has played a lot of characters who are cool, dangerous, in films like Goodfellas and Heat. They're violent or intimidating in a grand cinematic kind of way. But Dwight is pathetic, dangerous. He's scarier in a more domestic kind of way. He's a very small man using control and cruelty to inflate himself. So I think that definitely, it's not about the actual size of his member. It's about aura. It's about the energy. And Dwight definitely has the smallest penis energy of any film that we've seen up until this point. And for those who maybe forgot all of the films that we have watched and covered up until this point, you can check out letterboxd.com/MikeBackAtYou and see that running list in Our Hero De Niro list.
There you go. Well, great answer to the question. I do find it very funny, although really completely unsurprising considering the characters that we've got to talk about here and the explanation you just gave, that absent any recollection of the fact that the answer to this category was set in stone by our prior discussion, you also selected Dwight because it's pretty indisputable. There's really nothing to talk about.
Yeah.
But with that, we have 10 more categories, which I expect to be quite a bit more contentious. There's a lot of opportunity, I think, in some of these for varying reads of the meaning of the category. There's a lot of rich performances to draw on here. And so we'll see what kinds of conversations we can conjure up through the rest of these categories. And so let's move on to most clearly invented by a writer who has never spoken to another human being. Mike, which character did you have pegged for this category?
This is one of the more difficult categories for me, and ultimately I settled on Robert De Niro's character in the 2015 David O. Russell film Joy, starring Jennifer Lawrence. So in this film, he plays Joy. This is a twee indie biopic, almost fable, about the inventor of the Miracle Mop. And he plays Joy's chaotic dad, who's like this blunt truth teller, romantic disaster, source of family tension kind of character. And the reason I went with him is because this character, his function in the movie is to burst into scenes, add friction, say something blunt, and complicate Joy's already chaotic household. And I feel like instead of feeling like a real messy father, he feels more like a device that David O. Russell, the screenwriter, is deploying. And Joy has that heightened, slightly twee David O. Russell tone that rubs me the wrong way, where everyone's eccentric and constantly performing their sort of, thing. And I think Rudy is a great example of that. The character is capably performed by De Niro, but he doesn't come across as like a real person to me, the way that the best De Niro performances do. His bluntness doesn't feel very socially believable. Like, Joy has this friendship with her ex-husband who lives in her basement, and the way that Rudy treats the ex-husband is like, so it's like played for laughs, but it's so blunt, but it's blunt in a way that, like, I don't know, it felt kind of unrealistic to me. So I feel like he's just not absurd enough to be funny and not grounded enough to be moving. So I had to go with Rudy from Joy. Not one of my favorite films covered on the podcast.
I think that's a great answer. And it's kind of the canon answer from you, honestly, not Joy specifically, but I think any David O. Russell film, because I think the specific way that he writes his characters to have this like elevated, to your exact wording, like very highly eccentric tone to them, does read as the writing of someone who doesn't have a lot of doesn't seem to have a particularly informed or reasonable understanding of the way humans think, feel, behave, and communicate with one another, to put it in I guess, more artful terms. That's a great pick. I did consider a David O. Russell film for this. I thought about Amsterdam. It's not what I decided to pick. I assumed you would pick a David O. Russell film for this. So
yeah, that's fair. Fair assumption.
I wanted to go in a slightly different direction. I will say that beyond that, I did apply a sort of similar lens to this in my thinking of mine. And so I have selected Grandpa Ed Marino from the 2020 film The War with Grandpa. My justification for which being very similar to yours, right? We discussed this quite a bit in the episode. The character of the grandpa in The War with Grandpa makes no sense because there is such a mismatch between both the kind of moral weight of the two interlocutors in the titular war, Grandpa Ed and his douchebag little like 10-year-old grandson or whatever, who's just trying to fucking kill his grandpa.
Yeah, sociopath.
Right. So there's that part of it, which makes no sense. But then there's also the way that we understand Ed to be as viewers versus the way the text seems to understand Ed to be, as explained by the way that his fellow family members see him in the film. He just seems totally normal. His wife died and he's like a little bit sad. But for being a man who I think we're supposed to understand is in his late 70s or maybe early 80s, he seems like he's doing fine. Like he seems relatively physically fit. The way he's processing his grief seems to be totally normal. But everybody in the film is constantly talking about him as though he's like on death's fucking door and like he's like completely, askance from what you would expect in the way he's processing the grief over his wife's death. And the whole family dynamic, but especially the characterization of Ed in The War with Grandpa, just reads as a screenplay that would be written by someone who, similar to David O. Russell, doesn't seem to have a very robust understanding of humans or the way they behave and communicate with each other.
That's an interesting pick. Yeah, I guess I can see it. Sure. Yeah, because the thing with The War with Grandpa is, at least in the film version, I know it's based on a book, which sounds like it was a lot better than the film adaptation. If the little sociopath real life version of fucking Bart Simpson wasn't so pissed off about being displaced by his grandfather moving into their house, there just wouldn't be a film. There'd be no drama. There'd be nothing, because he's pretty well adjusted for someone who's been socially isolated and depressed in the wake of his longtime wife's death. There's not much going on there, you know?
Yeah. It's a really, really bad film. Folks will recall that we didn't really like it very much. And that was one of the big reasons why. Was just how little sense any of the characterization made. So there you go. Great category. Thank you, Mike. On to our next one. I have most likely to become a different genre of film if you follow him home. What did you have for this one, Mike?
Yeah, I think I'm going to hit you with a canon answer here, and I can't help but wonder if we have picked the same character from the same film. I am going to pick Robert De Niro as Lustig from Great Expectations.
Oh, that's really interesting. No, I didn't, but yeah, let's hear it.
I actually said this during our recap of the film because Lustig's character he's not there for most of the movie. We're following Ethan Hawke, his development as an artist, entering high society. So we really only see Lustig in the beginning of the film as an escaped convict who Ethan Hawke helps. And then at the very end of the film, he returns to New York and eventually, he reveals that he was Ethan Hawke's secret benefactor and then ends up dying. And I said during the recap, I would have rather seen a movie following Lustig in Europe as he rebuilds his fortune. Mm-hmm. And I think that instead of, Great Expectations, this Alfonso Cuarón adaptation of the story it was very interesting, artsy. It was kind of this lush, romantic, literary coming-of-age drama. But I think that if you follow De Niro's character over the course of his journey, suddenly you're in like a prison escape story, fugitive thriller, a European crime saga, and maybe even a redemption melodrama. And I think that personally, for my taste, I'd much rather see that film. I'd love to see middle-aged Robert De Niro gallivanting around early 90s Europe as like a fugitive who's like trying to make this illicit fortune so that he can financially support the only person who's ever shown him grace in his miserable fucking life. I think that would be very different tonally, and I think it'd be more of a crime adventure with a sentimental tone. I think that'd be pretty interesting. I'd watch that movie.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I don't recall that at all, but I definitely do think that is the canon answer. Yeah, I agree. I would really like to see that film. I didn't love Great Expectations, so I have to imagine that would be better.
I didn't either. Well, what would your pick be then if not Lustig?
Yeah, I picked a great answer here, and I wondered if you would choose this. I am curious whether you'll have anything to say about this character in any of your answers. But I have selected Sam from the 1998 film Ronin. I feel like there is something so interesting about these kinds of like crime heist thrillers where the on-screen action of the film is very constrained to a specific series of events and a specific category of occurrence within one small subsection of the life that a character lives. Because Sam seems like a guy who has quite a bit of depth to him that we just don't get to see, because the only way that we really see his character is in action doing his job. And I imagined a little bit of like the score. You remember how in the score, De Niro's character was opening a jazz club, and he had his hot Angela Bassett girlfriend, and he was just kind of hanging out, and we got to see a little bit of that on the side. Like, I imagine it would be really, really interesting to get that kind of characterization about Sam. I bet you he's a really interesting guy outside of work, and I would just really enjoy seeing that film about that character.
I agree with the Nick Wells choice from the score more than Sam from Ronin. I mean, Ronin, the title implies that Robert De Niro's character is a lone, wandering person. I think that he would be moving from job to job. I think that if we saw what happened to him after the events of Ronin, I think he's probably doing another sort of international job, clandestine sort of espionage kind of thing. I don't think his day-to-day life is going to be that much different from the more action-packed events of the film. You know what I mean? He's not going home to like his wife and kids. He's a Ronin.
Well, no, but he's probably going home to somewhere. I mean, you wouldn't do, how long is the job in Ronin? It's like a week long. You wouldn't do 52 jobs in a year. You'd do maybe 4 jobs in a year. There would be a lot of time in between to see like what he gets up to.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I got the sense, was it ever clear if he was like actually working directly for the CIA as like a W-2 employee, or if he was contracted by them?
I think he was contracted by them.
I got the sense that he couldn't go home. Yeah. So I think you would just get more of that sort of mood, that sort of tone. I don't think it would be so different. I think the Nick Wells and the score thing would be interesting because he is a career criminal heist man who also has these aspirations of going legit and running his own jazz club. And I think that would be a very funny tonal shift to just follow him, like going to the bank, applying for a small business loan, and like, like, what's your credit score? And he's got to like source the right sort of, acoustic panels for the walls. And he's reviewing the menu, and he's like, oh, the scallops aren't selling today, or you got 86 this, we're out of French fries, whatever. I'd watch that, like the drama of him running a jazz bar and lounge. I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, I think this one is a tough question because I think that you can probably select like at least 2/3 of the roles that we've seen him play, where the role he plays in the film is either sufficiently small that the character isn't well explored, or sufficiently focused on one facet of the character's life that there's a lot of detail left to be plumbed. I understand the point that you're making. I just think we do get a little bit of it in the score, but it's fair. I stand by my choice for this, even though I recognize and understand your disagreement.
Citizens weigh in. Email Mike@ourherodeniro.com.
Yep. Okay. Well, with that, on to our next category. I have most likely to give unsolicited life advice at a barbecue. Mike, who'd you have for this one?
This is one where I think we'll have the same pick. My pick was Jack Burns from Meet the Parents.
That's the canon pick. It's not what I picked. Yeah, that's the canon pick.
Can I, before I get into my rationale, can I ask why you didn't pick Jack Burns if you acknowledge it's the canon pick?
Because I think mine is a little bit more interesting. As something to discuss. I think that the fact that Jack Burns is the kind of person who would give unsolicited advice as a barbecue is like one of the first 3 things about his character that you would describe. I think it is equally true about my choice, but it's a more subtle observation about this character's tendencies.
We'll see. Yeah, I think it's interesting that you created the categories. You created a category with an incredibly obvious answer and then decided to like not respond with the answer to the category that you created. But
Keeping on your toes. Yep.
Sure. I mean, listen, Meet the Parents, one of the classic episodes of the podcast. Jack Burns, one of the great Robert De Niro characters. And he's obviously the kind of guy who he couldn't just exist in a barbecue. He'd be assessing it. He'd be judging the host. He'd be determining whether or not the burgers are being handled properly. You only flip once, that sort of thing. I think he would just be constantly analyzing and assessing every aspect of the entire function. He's a character who has extremely strong opinions about how everything should be done. He has that intimidating father figure energy, and he has such a rigid and hierarchical worldview that I think he would absolutely like corner someone and just start telling them what they should be doing or what they're doing wrong. And I think that a barbecue would be a very funny scenario for that character. Let's get some barbecue scenes in the remaining Fockerverse films that we haven't covered yet for the pod.
But it's not advice about the barbecue. It's life advice.
Yeah.
It's like, like if we were at a barbecue and you mentioned like, I have to go to the bank. And I asked you, like, where do you bank? And you said that you bank at, some bank that had a poor APY on its savings account. And I launched into some diatribe about how you should really go to this bank because the APY is better. Like, whatever. Like, that's the kind of advice.
Yes.
I think it's still true for
He
Jack
would do
Burns,
that.
but like, yes.
Yes, he would do that. I'm not saying it's all burger-specific advice. I'm saying it doesn't. Whatever the conversation is about, like, yeah, you'd be like, oh yeah, I just leased a new Honda Accord hybrid, and he would immediately tell you like why that was incorrect and why you shouldn't lease, like the terms are bad. You should actually do this. Oh no, Consumer Report says the Camry has slightly higher overall reliability. Like he'd be that kind of guy,
Yes, he is that kind of guy. I agree.
Don't challenge my canon pick. What's your pick for what is this category? Most likely to give unsolicited life advice at a barbecue.
I picked King from Killers of the Flower Moon. I think this is Robert De Niro's character who most enjoys the sound of his own voice and is most convinced of the virtue of his personal perspective. He's like the archetypal narcissist in that way. So I guess to your comment, like if he were at a barbecue in some professional capacity and so was like in a Machiavellian way managing his communication with other people, he may have the self-control not to do it. But his truest self is someone who's constantly dispensing wisdom and advice to everyone on any topic, regardless of their interest and in his perspective.
That's interesting. I don't know. Yeah, I guess it depends on your interpretation because I feel like Jack Burns would actually be giving you advice. It would just be like very, very brusquely delivered. Whereas with King, like King never really gives advice. Like he's just always manipulating everyone around him. I guess that could be framed as advice. I guess it depends on how he was communicating it to the people around him. But I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. That's an interesting pick. You're right. It is interesting. It's more interesting than Jack Burns.
The point that I'm making is not about the way that he behaves in the film. It's about what the way that he behaves in the film reveals about his attitudes, about his place in the universe versus other people's places in the universe. As the archetypical narcissist, this is a character who excuses all of the ways that he mistreats and harms others in his orbit by essentially appealing, probably in a totally informal, unspoken fashion in his own personal reasoning, to his own virtue and rightness above everybody else. Like he deserves to be the one who makes all of these decisions because he is the most right, most virtuous person. And so I think from that kind of narcissism comes the constant conference of unsolicited life advice.
Yeah, I see the logic. It makes sense to me. It's no Jack Burns.
I'm just trying to make interesting picks. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to make the definitive picks.
Well, let's see if you've made the definitive pick for this next one, which does have a canon pick, which I have selected. Most likely to have a weird relationship with food. Mike, who did you choose for this one?
Yeah. I mean, there's only one option here. It's Jake LaMotta from Raging Bull.
It is indeed, and that's what I've selected as well. Why don't you explain it to us?
Yeah, I mean, he's the only character in any of these films that we've covered so far that we actually see have a complicated relationship with food.
He has an eating disorder.
Right, he has an eating disorder. He's overweight for like half of the film. He has trouble making weight for fights. It all ties into his relationship with his body, masculinity, control, punishment, and self-loathing. It's not just that he becomes fat later in the film. It's that his body becomes one of the battlegrounds where his issues play out. You know, his body is his profession, so food is not a neutral thing. He's always in a constant state of gaining weight, cutting weight, et cetera, and it's all tied to discipline, violence, status, and control. And, you know, we had that famous steak scene in the beginning of the film that sort of clues us in, where he's, you know, yelling at his first wife because she overcooked the steak. And later on, the weight gain that he has feels emotionally loaded. It's not just normal middle-age decline. It feels like his appetite replacing discipline, or maybe appetite as another form of self-destruction. So I think it's fun that the canon pick is just a real person, you know, because this is like a biopic.
Like a real person who really had an eating disorder. Like, yeah, I really have nothing to add. I mean, listen, I have so little to say about Raging Bull relative to you. I feel like you described it so well. You know, the ways that Jake's relationship with food is complex are they're not an accident of his character, right? They are completely essential, completely foundational to his development throughout the film. We see his weird withholding of food from himself early in the film when he's obsessed with making certain weight categories. We see him eating a lot, you know, when he needs to gain weight to get into a higher weight category. And then you can imagine the through line from that kind of highly disciplined, highly regimented, highly like conclusion oriented relationship with food to just the gluttony and excess when he gains a lot of weight during the fall and the later portions of the film. So great pick. Totally agree it's canon, and you explained it very, very well. The next one I have is most likely to have cried in a car alone this week. Mike, who'd you have pegged for this one?
I thought about this one for a while, and ultimately, I mean, I think we'll probably get the same one for this, but I picked Wayne Mad Dog Dobie, his character from Mad Dog and Glory. Was that your pick?
No, I considered that one, but I have one that's different. But that's a great pick. I agree.
Oh, interesting.
Why don't you give your explanation?
Yeah, you know, Mad Dog in this film, Wayne, he has the energy of a man who's carrying more sadness, loneliness, and longing than he's capable of expressing out loud, which is one of the reasons why the movie didn't totally work for me. I don't think he'd make a scene. I don't think he would call someone, and he might not even necessarily understand why he was crying, but I could see him like sitting in his car, just like hands on the wheel, just sort of like gently sobbing for a few minutes before he like picks himself up and enters a crime scene to take photographs or whatever the hell he does in that movie. I think that he's very emotionally bottled up in a very believable way. And he's surrounded, because he's a police officer, he's surrounded by masculinity that he doesn't quite fit into. He's a little quieter, a little more sensitive. He has an ordinary sort of loneliness to him. And the relationship that he develops with Glory over the course of the film exposes how fragile he is. Like, the romance brings out this tenderness in him, but I think it also makes you aware of how he wants connection, but isn't fully equipped for it. So, yeah, I don't know. That's my pick for Mad Dog and Glory. But what about you? What was your pick for this category?
Yeah, that's a great pick. I went with a pick that I think that you will agree makes an equal amount of sense, just in a slightly different way. I chose Master Chief Billy Sunday from Men of Honor. You know, we see him throughout the film, right? Our initial exposure to him is as a violently racist, essentially, I guess, drill sergeant, right? In this diving program that he's in charge of, and then over the course of the film, we see the kind of walls of his violent racism fall down, to which he actually eventually becomes violently anti-racist in the film's in media res opening. And at the same time, we see his kind of mental fortitude start to break down a bit. He has some mental breakdowns. And I really do imagine like subtextually, but it reads as totally reasonable headcanon to me that Billy Sunday was a big car crier in those later periods of his life when he became violently anti-racist. You know, he could just get sucked into a moment where he's really reflecting on the horrible ways he thought and felt and behaved and treated people earlier in his life, and he's just crushed by the psychic torture of it.
That's a really interesting pick, and I don't know if I agree with that read of his character at all. I think that that character is too externalized for this category. I cannot imagine him crying alone in his car. Like, he transitions from being a violent racist in the military to a violent anti-racist, and I just think that over the course of the story, we see a lot of examples of his pain coming out sideways, you know, drinking, yelling, self-sabotaging, confronting people. He blows up a lot. He detonates a lot in bars, in the service, in front of people. And I don't see him holding it together until he's in his car by himself and then sort of letting it out. Like, he lets it out when he's around people in public. He makes it other people's problem. Even when he's no longer racist, he still gets into fights with people, you know?
You don't think that that kind of manner of externalization suggests a weak border wall that can break, obviously, in these moments when he externalizes his strong emotions in the form of violence, verbal or otherwise, but could also break in a more emotionally frail way in the form of tears?
I don't see it for that sort of character. I think he reacts harshly to stimuli. So I think that he might lose it if someone like provokes him socially, but I don't know. I don't know if I see him in his car just like doing it in there privately. But again, I leave it to the great citizens of De Niro Nation to decide for themselves.
There you go. Write us at Mike at ourherodeniro.com. Mike, what about most likely to have strong opinions about parking?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I went back and forth on this one for a bit, but ultimately I had to give it to my boy, my Robert De Niro character doppelganger, based on the quiz that we took in one of the first couple episodes of the podcast, Neil McCauley from Heat.
That's a good pick.
Yeah, I mean, for Neil McCauley, Heat's so fucking good. Our episode on Heat's also good. If you haven't heard it,
great
give
episode.
That a listen sometime.
Agree.
Yeah.
Yep.
For him, parking wouldn't just be some sort of mundane convenience. It'd be tactical. You know, he's always operating on that level where he chooses to sit in the cafe, his whole life philosophy, his discipline. He'd be thinking about things like sight lines, exits, timing, surveillance, whether he could be boxed in. I think for him, as a career criminal, high-level heister, I think that parking is just part of the job. And I think that he would have quiet opinions about parking, but they'd be pretty absolute. Like Jack Burns from Meet the Parents would probably lecture you about parking. But I think that Neil would just sort of look silently and judge you. And I definitely think that he would see parking as a reflection of character. And yes, I'm going with Neil McCauley from Heat, but I'm really curious to hear what your pick is.
That's a great read. I got a question for you. Do you have strong opinions about parking?
Absolutely. Oh my God. Yeah.
Yep. Oh yeah. Me too. It's something that I feel really strongly about. And it just comes, I think for me, I think it's probably different from the source of it for you. For you, it's, I think about your very like regimented, process oriented type A nature. For me, it's just about my like essentially supreme belief that we live in a society and our greatest moral duty is to try to keep the orderliness of society going. And when I see somebody who's parked outside of the line, someone without a handicap placard who's parked in a handicap space, somebody who's parked in front of a fire hydrant, it honestly enrages me, because it's like, why do you think that your personal needs or laziness are more important than the orderly functioning of this society that we've all agreed to live in together?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I do judge when someone is parked askew at a weird angle, or they're taking two spots, or they're too far up, or they're too far back. It only takes 10 seconds to adjust the park job, but they chose not to do it. Exactly. Yeah. We live in a society, as Mike the Fab likes to say.
You decided that saving yourself 20 seconds was more important than the 5 people on whom it's going to have a knock-on effect, because every space to the right of is going to be fucked up until there's enough margin for the cars to correct themselves. Like, oh, it gets me hot. I completely agree. I went with the canon pick for this one, though, which there's not much to talk about, but I do think it's funny, and I went with Jimmy Doyle from New York, New York, because he gets into a loud verbal altercation with another driver while he's trying to park.
Yeah, I guess, man, I really forgot about that movie. Movie's so fucking long and boring.
It's one of the worst we've seen, I think.
Yeah, no, I guess that is a fair pick because he does yell at some guy who's like he's waiting for Jimmy to pull out or whatever, and he's like not willing to do it. Yeah,
total prick. I hated that movie. If you index for length, I think it's probably the worst film we've watched for the podcast. What do you think?
Yeah, and I definitely that's a film that I definitely in retrospect gave too high a rating to. I was like giving it the Scorsese tilt factor, but you know,
right. Yep.
He's not a god. He's a man just like you or me. And he made a bad movie, and that's okay.
It's a really bad movie. Yep. It's like, it certainly isn't worse than Samsung, but Samsung has the decency to be like 86 minutes long. You know?
Oh, yeah. In and out.
Like, yeah. Scorsese does not have that restraint. He's going to make a movie that's only like 20% better than Samsung, but you better believe it's going to be 2 hours and 40 minutes long. You're gonna sit for a while.
Oh, God, yeah.
Okay. This next one is really fun. I think there's a couple different kind of vantage points that you and me can have on this one. I'm really curious to see what you've chosen for this. The next category is most likely to own a gun he's named. Who did you choose for this one?
I thought about this one for a while, and ultimately I landed on Robert De Niro's character, Benjamin Ford, from the 2019 film Killing Season.
Interesting. It's a good pick. Go ahead. Yep.
One of the worst films we watched for the podcast so far. For those who have not listened to our episode about the movie or watched the movie, which I think has got to be almost everyone, it's him and John Travolta, and Robert De Niro plays this like ex-military survivalist cabin dweller who lives alone, estranged from his family, and he lives in the Georgia wilderness, and he has rifles and stuff. And I just think that kind of person who lives a very isolated life, very back to basics, kind of just hunting, living off the land, self-sufficient, I think that would be the sort of person who is likeliest to name a rifle, to go like, yeah, this is Betsy, my beautiful Winchester or whatever. I think that isolation is what gets to you. And I think that his discomfort engaging with his family, with his son, etc., I think that he would probably anthropomorphize some of the shit in his cabin, like the guns. So that's ultimately why I went with Benjamin Ford from Killing Season, another one of cinema's great characters. But what about you, Mike? Who'd you go with?
Yeah, I think that's such an awesome answer, and I'm really happy because when I said that there were a few different ways to see this, I was envisioning essentially the two different ways to see this, right? So one is your way, which is that it's fundamentally sad, right? Like, it's like if you're like the kind of person who's like so isolated and so disconnected from humanity that you're anthropomorphizing a violent weapon that you have. But I went in a totally different direction with it. And I have chosen Jack Walsh from 1988's Midnight Run. Not in a sad way, but just as something fun that he does with himself that I don't think that he would ever even mention to somebody else. Like, he definitely seems like the kind of person who needs to engage in violence as part of his job, but it's a utility for him. It's just one of the tools that's in his toolkit. He's not an angry or violent person by nature. And he's a bounty hunter, and he's out there doing his shit. And I bet you he has a name in his head for his sidearm that he uses most frequently in a cool way, like in a fun way.
That's really fascinating. That wasn't even on my short list for this category.
Yeah, it's because you only considered the sad way, the way that's pathetic.
No, because Jack Walsh, Midnight Run, another great episode of the podcast. We love that movie. Great movie. One of the reasons why we're doing this whole project. He's too practical. I think that, yes, there are two ways to read the naming a gun thing. And like, one is the pathetic way that I prescribe to the Killing Season character. And the other way that you're thinking of, I think it's too eccentric for a guy like Jack Walsh. I think he's like just a pretty practical guy. I don't think he would have names for his guns, I feel like he would just view them as his guns. It's my 45, my Magnum, my shotgun, whatever. I don't know if I see him.
Oh, there's a quiet, reflective sentimentality to Jack's character. that is, I think, largely unspoken. I don't think that I agree at all that there's no eccentricity to his character, and I don't think that he would talk about it. I think it would just be a little fun thing that he had in his mind. Like this is, maybe he'd call it Jack after himself.
Seems way too cutesy. I don't know if I agree with this interpretation.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I am kind of a cutesy guy, so I think I see it in a lot of other people.
Yeah,
that's the kind of thing that I would do just in my head.
Do you think you're like Jack Walsh from Midnight Run?
I think that every person imagines that other people have more in common with them than they actually do, or that they have with others. I'm not saying that it's correct. I'm just explaining my own personal lens and why there are so many divergences between our choices.
I think this would be a wonderful project when we, are looking for something creative to do after this podcast concludes, is to rewrite Midnight Run, but with you in Jack Walsh's place.
Yeah, I don't think that I would do nearly as well as he does in the film.
Yeah, he'd probably die in the first scene.
Right, exactly. There would be like that first chase where he opens the car door into the guy who's running, and I wouldn't do that. I'm not that cool.
You'd be too busy talking to your fucking guns.
There you go. Exactly. All right. On to the next category. This one is most surprising Riz. Mike, who'd you choose for this one? This one, I think, has a canon answer, and it's what I've chosen, but go ahead.
I don't know. I feel like there's some room for interpretation because you said type or volume when you presented this category to me. You didn't say that out loud, so I feel the need to say it now. But ultimately, for most surprising Riz, type or volume, I'm landing on Robert De Niro's character Stanley Cox from the romantic drama Stanley and Iris.
The canon answer.
It is definitely the canon answer. I mean, it was a recurring topic of discussion during that episode, and I really enjoyed that episode. And honestly, I like the movie too. We talked all about how this character of Stanley was basically writing the new seduction playbook. You have to ignore nowadays, in the year of our Lord 2026, you have to ignore this toxic masculinity. You have to ignore pickup artist culture. You have to ignore, you shouldn't be negging women. You shouldn't be, mean or rude or whatever, or callous. You should follow Stanley Cox's blueprint and be tender, be a little shy, be a little bashful. He's sincere. He's not smooth or funny in a flashy way, but he's earnest. He's gentle. He's fundamentally decent. And by the end of the film, he's plowing Jane Fonda. It all worked out.
There you go.
Yeah.
At her very hottest, I think. During that era. I completely agree. I would just add a little bit of what you didn't mention about his style. His kind of dorky plaid and gingham shirts that he wears, but later on when he dresses up and he's got a lot of very warm, soft, woolen kind of outerwear that he's wearing that looks really cool. And he's also, he has this, I think, very cute kind of nerdy inventiveness to him, like all of his crazy inventions that he's making. Stanley is the king. Absolutely. He is definitely the De Niro performance we've seen with the most Riz. Just a couple more left now. We are on to the He's Right But Still award. I think this one has a canon answer. I'm curious what you've selected. What did you pick for this one?
Yeah, I mean, how would you explain this category, the He's Right But Still award? I'm interested that you think it has a canon answer.
Yeah, my interpretation of He's Right But Still is a question of style, not substance. So somebody who fundamentally has good ideas or whose goals are noble, but whose methods are so questionable that it's hard to fully respect what they're doing.
Okay, so I'll say my pick, and before I get into my rationale, I just want to know whether or not it's the same pick that you made. Okay. I picked the character Dick Kelly, the dirty grandpa from the 2016 comedy film Dirty Grandpa.
The canon answer.
Okay, absolutely. Perfect.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I disagree with a lot of his methods, like drugging his grandson and Zac Efron and then allowing him to drive away on a motorcycle in the middle of the night. But the entire movie is built around the premise that the dirty grandpa isn't wrong about Zac Efron's character's life. You know, Zac Efron's character, Jason, is uptight. He's repressed. He's trapped in a bad relationship. He's disconnected from himself, and he's moving toward a future that he doesn't actually seem to want. And the dirty grandpa, Dick, correctly identifies this problem. But, you know, because this is like a rated R, gross out sex comedy, he addresses it in the most grotesque, inappropriate, illegal, boundary destroying ways imaginable. So, I mean, you know, we covered all of that in our episode, fun movie, not a very good movie, but a fun movie. But the stuff he does, like he manipulates his grandson, he's obscene, he's selfish, he's wildly inappropriate, and he uses his grief from the passing of his wife and his grandfatherly authority as cover, which is like really fucked up. If this wasn't like a dirty R-rated sex comedy romp kind of film, you would view the actions of this character as totally insane. Like you'd want this guy arrested and locked away from society for the greater good.
In an institution. Like he needs help.
Yo, exactly. But ultimately, you know, he's right and it all works out. So the ends justify the means. Yeah, it's powerful stuff.
Yep. I really nothing to add. You know, it's just like on the sides of the disagreement, right? You have the dirty grandpa and the clean grandson. And, you know, we like Zac Efron. He's handsome. He's hunky. He seems like a nice guy. He's kind of going along to get along. And we dislike the dirty grandpa because he's a monster who disrespects all boundaries between him and everybody else around him. But at the end of the day, to your point, Zac Efron is not making very good choices in his life, and his grandpa does have his best interests at heart, even though the ways that he goes about acting on those interests would result in the real world in hopefully someone being institutionalized.
Yeah.
And with that, we are on to our final category. This one is most likely to need therapy award, and it has a qualifier, which is that we cannot select analyze this for this question. Mike, what did you choose?
I think there's a canon pick here, right?
I think so too. I'm guessing we chose it. But yeah, go ahead. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I had to go with one of the actual great characters of cinema covered on this podcast, in my opinion. I went with his character, Gil Renard, from the 1996 Tony Scott film, The Fan.
Oh, that's interesting. I do think that's the canon pick, but that's not what I chose.
Are you fucking kidding me?
I think mine is also a canon pick.
You didn't pick Gil Renard.
I didn't know. Yep. You want to know something? I didn't really think about Gil while I was doing this exercise, and I should have. I think I'm going to give this one to you without even really arguing. And I don't think my pick is bad, but I think Gil is better than who I've chosen for this question.
I can't wait to hear who you chose, but I need to explain my rationale for picking. I mean, what is there even to say? We literally use Gil Renarded as a term in our lexicon ever since we watched that movie. And you don't think he'd be the character that would benefit the most from one therapy session?
Oh, yeah, you're right. Well, let's hear the explanation.
He has so many active problems converging at once. Anger, obsession, impulsivity, violence, family breakdown, identity collapse, and a complete inability to tolerate rejection or humiliation. He's obviously in a crisis. He's not just like a troubled guy. He's unraveling in real time over the course of the film. His work life, family life, and sense of self are all collapsing, and he does not have any healthy ways to process it. It doesn't help that he's a knife salesman either. No. His anger
not the job you want him to have.
Right. You want him to sell like Kleenex or something really soft.
Right. Something he can cry into. Like that's what he needs. Right.
Yes.
Like that's his tool. Yep.
His anger is completely unmanaged. He escalates quickly. He takes things personally, and he seems to experience frustration as betrayal. He has serious relationship and parenting issues. There's a restraining order against him. He is a poor caretaker of his son when he's like with him, when he has custody. And his fandom becomes a substitute identity. His obsession with baseball and Wesley Snipes' character, Bobby Rayburn, it's not just about like a sports fan who goes too far. It feels like he's using his fandom to compensate for other areas where he feels powerless, rejected, or mediocre. So I feel like, you know, one session obviously wouldn't move the needle very far. It wouldn't make Gil Renard emotionally healthy, but I think that maybe it would interrupt the spiral. Maybe just you introduce some healthy anger management techniques, deep breathing, something like that. Maybe it would just help break the cycle just a little bit. So that's why I had to go with Gil Renard from The Fan, one of the most fun movies we've watched for the podcast. But Mike, I really want to know, who'd you pick for this category?
No, I went with Jimmy Conway from Goodfellas.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, he's, he understands the totality of his relationships with all people around him in a transactional manner and abstracts away the emotion that he feels for the small group of people with whom he's actually close. Tommy and, God, what is the main character of Goodfellas' name?
Ray Liotta.
Yeah, Tommy and Ray Liotta, whatever his character's name is. Tommy and Ray Liotta. He abstracts all of those feelings of warmth and closeness behind violence to the point where, spoiler alert, when Tommy dies, he can't even let Ray Liotta touch him and just angrily kicks a phone booth over. And so I think that you make a strong observation that Gil Renard, being in a crisis the way that he is, would benefit maybe in a way that could be the kind of tipping point, like marginal action from a single therapy session that could disrupt the violent spiral that he's descending into. But I think that Jimmy Conway is the character who could probably benefit the most from some therapy systematically, I think.
That is a really interesting pick. It's not even one that I considered. I see the logic. It makes sense to me. My question is, do you think that character is a sociopath? Do you think therapy could work on him?
Well, therapy can work on some sociopaths, right?
Yeah.
I'm asking you. You would know, not me. But I think that it's sociopathy isn't like a death sentence. I know some of the cluster B personality disorders can be like a metaphorical death sentence for your ability to be treated by psychology. But I think there are some sociopaths who've had success in therapy, aren't there?
Yeah, I don't know any case studies off the top of my head, but yeah, I mean, it is an interesting pick. It's interesting to consider, to imagine him talking to a licensed,
with it.
How would that conversation go? How much would he be willing to open up, and how much of it would just be him complaining about his idiot fucking compatriots who are all blowing money on fur coats and new cars?
I mean, we do see this a little bit to a certain extent with Tony and The Sopranos, right? And I think that the therapy really does benefit him. I think that just what you see, kind of in his arc with the therapist in The Sopranos, and I think this is actually acknowledged textually in the episode that's about her considering firing him as a client. That eventually the therapy becomes like a crutch, right? Like a self-justification framework that a sociopath can use to manage others more effectively and to justify their own poor behavior to themselves. But it probably ultimately does make Tony, I think, a better person, slightly better in touch with his feelings and his family, even though it doesn't save him in the end, obviously. Spoiler alert for The Sopranos.
Are you telling me that The Sopranos doesn't have a happy ending?
Yeah, Tony is not redeemed. It doesn't end with him giving a monologue to the camera where he's like, and I've given up my violent mobster ways. Thank you,
right.
Dr. Melfi.
Right. He's redeemed and the New York mob thrives post 9/11.
Well, great discussion. Do you have anything else you want to say about this category?
About this category in particular? No, but I have some concluding thoughts about this whole exercise.
That's why I was specific about my question. Oh, and with that, those are all of our categories. So, Mike, what did you think about our discussion on the superlatives?
I really enjoyed this whole exercise of having to come up with picks for each category. It was honestly pretty difficult because we have covered so many films at this point that just constantly scrolling through the list and trying to remember what was this character in this one? Oh God, what was this movie? It was difficult, but I really enjoyed it. And I feel like a lot of our picks point to the same recurring De Niro idea. He plays a lot of characters whose identities are way more fragile than they want anyone to know. Like there are so many control freaks, failed patriarchs, faded legends, obsessive loners, and guys who think that discipline or anger can keep them from falling apart. So I think that while the categories are kind of like joke categories, I think it's interesting because as an intellectual exercise, it kind of reveals like the greater De Niro cinematic universe, which is a bunch of men trying and often failing to survive the gap between who they think they are and who they actually are. And, that's why we love Robert De Niro. That's why he's one of the greats.
It's really true. Yeah, I completely agree. I too really enjoyed this exercise, and I do love kind of reflecting on his canon as an opportunity to think about him as an artist, and as a man who's lived at this point a full life in the world, right? I mean, this is a guy who is, I think, in his heart, a very sensitive, very intelligent, and very kind of in tune with his feelings sort of person who grew up in a hypermasculine environment where those ways of thinking and being and engaging with the world weren't always the most acceptable, and a man who always felt a certain sense of estrangement from his father, right? And so I think you do see, De Niro's conception of masculinity, not just in the ways that he depicts these characters, which is masterful. He's an incredible actor, and we're so lucky to get to watch all the films that he's done, but also in the roles that he chooses to take on. It's very clear to your comment that there is a sort of man whose identity and character he's interested in exploring, and it's just so cool. Like, man, you know what I think about all the time now as we're approaching the end of the podcast, like we're definitely going to finish it now, is like, how cool is it going to be when we've seen every Robert De Niro movie? That's so cool. Like that is a really cool, like scope and depth of understanding to have about like one of our great modern artists. And I just love thinking about him. What a cool guy. It's really fun.
Yeah, what an interesting accomplishment that'll have. I wish someone would give us a plaque or something,
I think that we should have plaques made when we finish the podcast, man. Why not?
Yeah, that's not a bad
that'd be
idea.
Fun. Yeah, I think we should get one made.
Like the little trophies that they give people who participate in T-ball games or something like that.
I'm also really excited that, we're kind of approaching the end and he's not sick. So I think that we'll probably get at least a handful more Robert De Niro films after we finish the podcast. And I think it's going to be really fun to make a point to go see all those and record like 1 or 2 special episodes a year until he stops working, of just whatever schlock he decides to put out in these final years of his working life. Like, it's been so fun to engage with him as a creative person. It's so cool. All right. Well, love to hear your thoughts and just to reflect on 80 episodes of this wonderful podcast. And now I think we'll move into our final segment of the special episode, which is some listener mail. So a reminder to folks who are listening, we love receiving letters. I think they tend to foment a lot of really fun discussion and agreement and or disagreement between Mike and I, between us and our listening audience. And so we would invite you to write us about literally anything at mike@ourherodeniro.com. And you can find all that information as well as links to all of our stuff at our website at ourherodeniro.com.
Yeah, guys, this is an interactive podcast. This isn't Smartless. Yeah. This isn't the Joe Rogan experience. We value interaction with our listeners, so you're not going to get that from those corporate pods. This is homegrown, independent guerrilla podcasting. Email us literally anything, and we will respond to it, unless it's like overtly racist or sexist or something.
That's true. And of the letters that we've reviewed to read today, there was really nothing in them that resulted in our not wanting to read them. And so I guess first I would like to cover a letter from friend of the pod, wife of the pod, Caroline, who writes a response to our 70th episode, Recommendation Station. She writes, "Dear Mike, great episode, movie recommendations. I especially enjoyed your reviews of movies that were originally recommended by me. Speaking of movies I recommended, I couldn't help but notice that your recommendation lists omit recommendations made by guests of the pod. I'm sure that this omission was made unintentionally and that you plan to do an all mic'd up or something to cover them soon. The fans want more recommendation episodes. Yours faithfully, week in and week out, a proud citizen of De Niro Nation." Mike, what do you think about this letter from Caroline?
Yeah, Caroline, I don't know why you have to call us out here. Recommendation Station was our 70th episode spectacular. I led that one. That was my idea. And the reason why I did that episode, the reason why I even came up with that idea, the primary reason was because I thought Mike and I had recommended so many great films over the course of the pod that it was worth highlighting some of them and discussing some of them. But the secondary reason was to force Mike to watch some of my great recommendations, because I couldn't help but notice in our master podcast spreadsheet where we track all of this stuff, that he had not watched many. And I thought that was a damn shame. So I thought that this was a great way to get him to watch my recommendations. And I wasn't concerned about guest recommendations on the pod. That's your own cross to bear. However, I will say, maybe that could be a good idea for a future episode of All Mic'd Up, our famous podcast within a podcast, where anything goes. And while I do not remember all of the guest recommendations off the top of my head, I will say that I am waiting to do Dog Day Afternoon until the summertime. That was a Philip recommendation. I'm also waiting to do Philip's latest recommendation, 8 Men Out, until I actually watch it with Philip, which could be God knows when. And last but not least, Caroline, you previously recommended the 2009, was it Polish animated film, A Town Called Panic. And I did actually watch that before our 70th episode spectacular, and I loved that movie. I thought it was excellent. I thought it was super funny, and I give it a 4.5 out of 5. So I do appreciate that recommendation. I'm always listening. I'm always learning. I'm always watching. This podcast is a panopticon. So, don't be so confrontational. Tone's important, but I do appreciate you writing in. What about you, Mike? What's your response to your wife?
Yeah, I don't think we have any obligation to even watch, let alone discuss the recommendations made by guests of the pod. And honestly, I think that those of you who have had the distinct honor of guesting on Our Hero De Niro should just be grateful to have gotten to participate at all, let alone to be allowed to make a recommendation, taking up equal space to Mike and I. So kind of we're breaking character a little bit here. I can't believe that I'm the one who has a less conciliatory, more combative tone to this question. But I don't know. You're just lucky that Mike watched A Town Called Panic and liked it so much.
Yeah, you're right. 2 more notes. One, I just remembered that Andrew's recommendation in our Mean Streets episode was Empire Records. I did watch that. I didn't love it, but it was an entertaining 90s time capsule. So I'm glad I watched it. But no, Mike, you're totally right. Like, being a guest on the podcast is a privilege. We're the ones who are doing all the hard work.
Right.
Like, it's nice for you that you have the space on our platform to make a recommendation out to all the citizens of De Niro Nation. That should be enough for you, Look inward.
I agree. I mean, listen, we're 80 episodes into this. Like, you and me are rock solid, man. Like, we are at the point where, like, there's no guest we're going to have on this podcast unless it's Robert De Niro, who is going to improve the quality of the thing that you and me are putting out on our own with hundreds of hours of practice under our belt. So no, it is a privilege to get to guest on the pod. So thanks for writing, Caroline. Great letter. Let's move on to a letter from friend of the pod, former guest of the pod, Andrew. This one's subject line is In Flanders Field. He writes, Flanderization has a more specific meaning, although I'm glad Fab got the namesake. It's whereby a character's traits in a series become exaggerated and centralized so that a complex character becomes about one thing, usually for jokes, often in a way that contradicts the established character. The nominal example of Ned Flanders started out as a snooty, ostensibly Christian neighbor and rival for Homer, but over time his personality became obsessive evangelicalism. For example, in earlier seasons, he prepared and drank alcohol, but in later seasons, there are jokes about his puritanical aversion to alcohol. As for the Play Next menace, I couldn't agree more. Yesterday, I watched THX 1138, and the very end when the credits start to roll is very dramatic and compelling, and for me it was immediately ruined by an overlay for some unrelated media.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, Andrew, I appreciate you providing the deep dive and the actual definition. I can't help but feel like we got the gist of it during the episode, so I don't know if a more detailed explanation was necessary. But yes, that is the actual definition and explanation of Flanderization. I don't want to overdo the Simpsons analysis because Mike the Fab has famously never watched The Simpsons, to his own detriment, really. He's only hurting himself. But when it comes to this Play Next thing, Andrew is referencing in whatever episode he was writing in response to, we were complaining about how movies, when they end now on streaming services, within, 5 to 10 seconds, they minimize the actual credits. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, next film starting in 5 seconds. And it's I think it kind of ruins the end of that movie watching experience. I think it's nice to be able to sit with a movie, to sit with the credits, to hear that ending music, and kind of just let it kind of gradually fade out. You're transitioning out from the world of the film. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you there. And the last thing I'll say, THX 1138, an early George Lucas film, pre-Star Wars, nice dystopian sci-fi picture. I love that film, and it's a real shame that Lucas never did anything like that again. I think in terms of like 70s dystopian sci-fi, THX 1138 is an incredible movie. So I'm glad you watched it, and I hope you gave it a good rating on Letterboxd.
There you go. I have very little to add beyond what you said. I will say, just in case folks are curious, this was a response to our Analyze That episode, wherein we discussed the Flanderization of the character of Paul Vitti as it moved into its sequel, and the context for our discussing the irritating way that streaming services try to funnel you into the next thing you're going to watch was our reflecting on how much we each enjoyed the blooper reel at the end of Analyze That, and how that's kind of been killed by the fact that now the next fucking bullshit just starts playing as soon as you finish watching something. But no, I agree. You want to know something? I've never seen THX 1138. I should really watch it.
Yeah, I just looked it up on Letterboxd, and I'm kind of surprised. I think I'm the odd man out here. Andrew gave it a 3.5 out of 5. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 based on my memory of watching it a long time ago, but it only has a 3.4 on Letterboxd.
Huh, interesting.
I think that I just really like that sort of vibe. And I think that's probably why my rating for it is so high. I love like sparse, minimalistic, dystopian science fiction where people live in like white rooms and are shaved bald and are forced to conform. I love that shit. That's all good. It's all gravy for me.
Yeah, you really do, man. I mean, I like I said, I've never seen it. I just know its kind of reputation and pedigree. And I think it's a vibes film, right? You really like vibes films.
Oh, I love vibes films. And honestly, as someone who has a luscious, thick head of hair, despite being 36 years old, my personal idea of dystopia is having my head shaved bald.
Yeah, would be horrible. I would love to see it, though. So maybe we can make that one of our Patreon reward tiers that we'll both shave our heads if it gets to a certain point. I mean, I wouldn't make you do it alone. I would do it, too, of course.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah.
I like that idea.
Yeah, it's a very funny idea. Well, great letter, Andrew. Thank you for writing in. Really appreciate your thoughts. We have another combative letter here from former guest of the pod, friend of the pod, wife of the pod, Caroline. This letter is entitled Pollyanna. Dear Mike the Fab, perhaps you will internalize this if I call you out in a public forum. Quote, Pollyannish doesn't mean, quote, squeamish. It means, quote, optimistic to a fault. Stop using the word wrong. Yours, wife of the pod. P.S. To tie this into the podcast, I recommend the film Pollyanna from 1960. Sure. Yeah, I don't really know what to say. But yeah, I definitely have internalized it now that I've read this on the air. And when I listen to it when it comes out, I will internalize it even more. So thanks, Caroline. Really appreciate the correction and note. What about you, Mike? You got anything to say about this?
Yeah, I mean, this letter is really directed to you, but apparently Pollyanna-ish means excessively or naively optimistic. Does not mean squeamish, prudish, delicate, or easily scandalized. So I guess, Caroline is correct. I let it slide in the moment because I didn't really know what it meant, and I did not care to do live fact checking. And, sometimes you just have to let things slide for the sake of flow in the episode, But,
I agree.
How nice that we're able to slow down and hear Mike's wife call him out live on the pod.
It is great. Next, we are on to a very substantial letter by a friend of the pod, Chase. Chase, it is so great to hear from you. This is entitled The Mission Episode Fan Mail Letter. Greetings, Mike, and the entire Our Hero De Niro listenership once again. Pardon the delay in letter writing and reviewing movies over on Letterboxd, because in addition to going through my unread Sundoku pile of books, I've been gearing up for a 2-week visit to Japan in November later this year. All the usual ticket and online rental spending is being saved instead into my travel budget, so whatever's free on YouTube, Internet Archive, and OK.ru will keep my movie watching needs met in the meanwhile. Pirate flag emoji. I felt compelled to write in because of the Mission episode rekindling my fondness, particularly for its lush score by Ennio Morricone. One was definitely robbed of the Oscar for Best Original Score in its respective year. This won't be your last encounter with Morricone's incredible music, as two of my most anticipated films in De Niro's filmography have yet to be covered on the show as of this writing: Once Upon a Time in America and Novecento, aka 1900. If I had to pick an all-time favorite film score composer, if it isn't Ennio Morricone, it would most certainly be Sakamoto Ryuichi of former Yellow Magic Orchestra fame. I love Yellow Magic Orchestra. Capable of elevating any film or show regardless of its merits or flaws, Sakamoto, like Morricone, could salvage even a not very good film into something mildly more tolerable and interesting with always compelling music. A close personal third for me would be Hisashi Joe, a groundbreaking neoclassical composer and easily the greatest in creating music for animated cinema. Besides those three, most of my favorite film score composers are of the variety that were already well established in the classical establishments of music, such as Erich Wolfgang Korngold, who scored many of the Errol Flynn swashbucklers John Williams took heavy influence from, Sergei Prokofiev, another composer Williams stole a lot from, Dmitri Shostakovich, and Alfred Schnittke. Takemitsu Toru is another favorite composer of mine in terms of going very experimental or in a musique concrete style direction, daring to go beyond the strictures of genre, conventionality of technique, and obvious sentimentality when writing music to film. And what's ironic is that I don't enjoy having too much music in a film, unless it's the one musical I'll subject myself to on a rare but unlikely occasion, or concert music-oriented documentary. I tend to find music such an easily overwhelming component in movies that it can sometimes go against the film and do most of the work and easily allow the visual storytelling to become secondary. It's maybe why, outside of the original Star Wars trilogy, the first film of which besides Jaws swiped so much from Igor Stravinsky's Rites of Spring before Williams developed his recognizable style, and the first Indiana Jones films, I find John Williams too dominant, repetitive, and cloying a lot of the time when scoring for many other inferior or smaller films. The Hans Zimmer, Steve Jablonski, Thomas Bergenson type scores I also find overblown and just booming symphonic cortisol spikes to the eardrums. It could be just the kind of viewer that I am, but personally the best type of music in a film is what you can feel through listening but never mentally notice to the point of getting yanked out of the experience. Having watched so much silent cinema shown with top-notch accompaniment in person probably heightened this awareness for me. The music is vital in rounding out the sensory experience, but should never push the images into a corner or away from the focus of the plot, the characters, the philosophical intent of the director or writer, etc. What are your favorite film score composers? What are some composers you find overrated or cliche, and do you have the same irritation regarding mainstream film scores that I similarly have? Needle drop playlist soundtracks are another slippery slope that warrants a whole separate letter and discussion in itself. Unsigned. Mike. This is really fun. I read these when they came in, but never went back and read them again. So I am considering this question totally blind. I never thought about this. I wonder if you did. What are you saying answer to these questions that Chase has asked?
Yeah, first of all, let me say, Chase, what a pleasure it is to hear from you again. I worried for a while that Chase had stopped listening or maybe something bad had happened to him. I think it would really help if maybe Chase wore some sort of tracking collar or something, just so we could keep track of him, make sure he's safe. Maybe we could tune into the flock cameras, around his local jurisdiction and just make sure that he's all right, that he's listening to every episode of Our Hero De Niro. But when it comes to the substance of this very well-written and long letter, no one does it like Chase. This really got me thinking about what I like in film scores. And listen, right off the bat, I can't go toe to toe with Chase on film composer knowledge. I'm not even going to try, but I will try to highlight some scores that I like and what stands out to me about them. I think overall, unlike Chase kind of calls out scores that are too noticeable. I think for me, I kind of view it as a bell curve, where in the middle are most film scores that I don't really notice one way or the other. And I really only notice a film score if it stands out to me in a very positive or very negative kind of way on those two tail ends. I really like scores that create a whole atmosphere for the movie. And I think my favorite soundtracks tend to be propulsive, electronic, moody, eerie or textural. And I really like when a score feels like a part of the film's architecture. So just to highlight some scores that I like off the top, everyone who listens to this podcast knows that Nine Inch Nails is my favorite band of all time. I love a good Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross soundtrack. And I think the best example of that is probably The Social Network, the 2010 David Fincher film that I constantly call a masterpiece, a perfect film. And I love that their soundtrack is basically just instrumentals from their Ghosts 1 through 4 album. It's cold, it's anxious, it's digital, and it's a perfect match for that movie. Obviously, we did our 40th episode spectacular about the 2020 Christopher Nolan film Tenet, one of our favorites, watched it 10 times and counting. And I love Ludwig Göransson's pulsating, overwhelming, rhythmic, electronic soundtrack. I love that it almost attacks the viewer. And I love how Nolan, he integrates it into the film in such a way where like he will dial the volume of dialogue down in certain sequences and ramp the volume of the soundtrack up in such a way that it is instructing us as viewers to focus less on the specifics or what are happening and just immerse ourselves in the feeling of being with these characters, Neil and the protagonist. I love that. Going back to Nine Inch Nails with their recent soundtrack for Tron Ares, that's music as design. I love its sleek, electronic, cyberpunk aesthetic. It's the most exciting part about that film. It's like the only thing that made it watchable. And obviously, we did my last year's birthday pick about the 1999 sci-fi masterpiece, The Matrix, featuring a score by Don Davis. And I love how operatic, industrial, and atonal it is. It really helps you feel the same sense of unease that Mr. Anderson, aka Neo, feels throughout the film's narrative. And just a couple more that I've mentioned on the podcast that I think are worth highlighting. Alien 3. I fucking love Alien 3 so much. I love how dark and choral and gothic and apocalyptic that soundtrack is. It goes a long way to creating such a unique atmosphere. And Alien 3, it's the concluding film in the Alien trilogy, but it feels so different than the two preceding Alien films. And I think a lot of that has to do with that really excellent score. And I think just the last one that I'll bother mentioning for now, we did an All Mic'd Up episode about this one. Marty Supreme, Daniel Lopatin, aka 10 Tricks Point Never, ambient, vaporwave-ish electronic composer. He did the score for Marty Supreme. He did it for Uncut Gems. He has a solid body of solo work, and I love his use of unique electronic sounds. I'm not anti-electronic music. I love weird beeps and boops. And I think that in addition to being very texturally interesting on their own, they also go a long way to, again, like building the atmosphere of those universes of Uncut Gems and Marty Supreme. They're a little off. In a way, it's not traditional orchestral instrumentation. And I think that does help clue us into the emotional states of the protagonists in those films, Howie and Marty Supreme. But I do agree that what Hans Zimmer has kind of wrought upon the film industry in the last 15 or so years is kind of bad because he has so many imitators now, and that sort of generic booming trailer music, especially in the wake of like Inception and The Dark Knight, that can become exhausting because it's bombastic for bombastic's sake. And honestly, a great example of that sort of score was in the movie Red Lights, which we covered just a little while ago in the podcast. Definitely felt like that sort of Hans Zimmer imitator score. When it comes to overrated composers, kind of winding down my response to Chase here, I wouldn't call John Williams overrated. I love his work in the Star Wars films, of course. But when you watch like a bunch of John Williams scored films, like I watched Jaws pretty recently, you hear the motifs coming back like there and in the Indiana Jones films. And yeah, there's a little similarity there. There's a little too much overlap for me. And the other one I want to highlight, I don't think he's a bad composer. I think he's a great composer, but Danny Elfman. We had a whole conversation about him in our Midnight Run episode. Like, he's obviously incredibly talented, and I do really like some Danny Elfman scores, but I think that sometimes his scores can feel distracting to me. Like, they can feel too over the top, too dominating in a way that I think distracts from the mood of the film rather than enhancing it. So overall, just really, really enjoy the letter, Chase. Thank you for writing in and getting me to think about this so much. But I hope that someone out there will seek out these soundtracks to a couple of these films and give them a listen, because I think there's a lot of good stuff there. Mike, what about you? What's your blind response to this letter from Chase?
I think Chase and I are quite aligned on the substance of our preferences for what we like. I think that I can sympathize with and even remember feeling the kind of negative that Chase describes in his letter of when a score is too overpowering or cloying, it can feel a little bit manipulative. But it doesn't really bother me so much. I don't mind being manipulated. I'm sure that I've talked about this on the podcast when we've talked about film scores before. But in general, I do think that if I had to pick favorites of all time, I think Morricone and Hisashi are probably my two favorite film score composers. So little to add beyond what Mike said, which was incredibly well thought out and almost all of which I agree with. I am a great Hans Zimmer lover. I love the Batman trilogy scores he did. I love the Inception score. I don't know how you could possibly not. And I think that's just one of those things about great art that sucks, is that when you get really, really great art that moves a lot of people, you end up with a lot of derivation, a lot of imitation that if you're not really careful can cheapen the beauty and grandeur and specter of these things that were so special. It can make it easy to listen to the Inception score and think, well, fuck, man, I don't want to listen to this bullshit. Like, everybody's doing this. But the Inception score really is so special. And so it's just a shame that a decade of imitators has kind of cheapened Hans Zimmer's contributions. There are kind of two things that I want to highlight that Mike said as kind of specific insight to give into my taste. I too love the Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross scores, although I strongly prefer the Challengers score to the Social Network.
Oh yeah,
I love how the Challengers score, which has got to be one of my absolute favorite film scores of the past decade, becomes a character in the film almost in and of itself, and it really carries you through so many different genres and so many oral soundscapes in a way that really, I think, very richly mirrors both the emotional states of the characters on the screen as well as the events that they're going through in their lives. And something that I really love in film score is when it's very noticeable and the way that you notice it is part of the story that the film is telling. And so let me here take the opportunity to discuss, I think for the first time, it's got to be in months that we've talked about this film, but one of your very favorite films and mine, First Reformed, which has a fantastic score by Lustmord. This is the 2017 Paul Schrader masterpiece, First Reformed, starring Ethan Hawke. Which we are great Paul Schrader lovers on this podcast, even though he is pretty hit or miss. And I think First Reformed is his masterpiece. Do you agree?
Yeah, man. I think First Reformed is one of the best films of this century. I think it is incredible.
Yep. I'm so interested to see once we watch Taxi Driver, which you prefer, since he wrote the screenplay for Taxi Driver.
Well, so I knew that, but that is
very similar stories. Yep.
Interesting.
That's going to be really interesting. Yep. So anyway, First Reformed has this really stripped down, almost like de-resed kind of electronic score, very weird ambient sounds, really unsettling. And it is incredibly noticeable. And the reason why it's so noticeable is because there is no music for the first hour of the film. And so when the music starts, you really notice it. And what's fascinating is the window that it gives you into Toller's state of mind as his self essentially unravels for the second half of the film. But it really makes you, when the music starts happening, reflect again on the first half of the film and just how thoroughly you did not notice that there was no music and why. What it was about the way the characters were being presented, the conversations that were happening, the cinematography, everything that was happening that made you not notice that there was no music happening. It really is such an incredible creative choice by Schrader to employ the score in that way. And so that's something that I really enjoy as well, when the noticeability of the score at points really emphasizes the negative space of the absence of music during parts of the narrative. But man, what can I say? I mean, Chase, I completely agree with Mike. Thank you so much for writing in an incredibly thoughtful letter. And it's just great to hear from you and hear your thoughts. Thanks for writing. And finally, I have one more letter from friend of the pod, former guest of the pod, Philip, a.k.a. Lips. Subject line is movie themes. Philip writes, "You boys mentioned in Hi Mom that Brian De Palma returns to a theme of the way media distorts the truth in his films, and Scorsese certainly has themes he likes to focus on as well. If you were a movie director, what kind of themes would you return to again and again?" Philip, a.k.a. Lips. Go ahead, Mike.
This is a fun question. This also really got me thinking. So I don't think that I'd be a director with one grand thesis, but I really thought about the sort of stories that I'm drawn to, and I think there'd be a few recurring themes or obsessions that I would want to dive into as a filmmaker, as a storyteller. So I'm just going to kind of tell you the ones that I came up with. So number one, the idea that the past is never really past. I really like characters who are shaped by regret, old choices, buried histories, and things that they can't quite outrun. So not necessarily like trauma in the clinical sense, but the way that earlier actions echo through a person's present life. Number two, morally compromised loners. Well, I love a movie about a morally compromised loner. I love protagonists who are isolated, ethically ambiguous, and maybe not fully trustworthy. So someone who, is in that gray area, is not a pure hero or villain, but, people with a code, damage, vanity, shame, or obsession, in a very neo-noir kind of way. I think that if I was a filmmaker, if you gave me here's $50 million, make a movie, I'd probably end up making a neo-noir. Number three, the idea of identity as performance. So thinking, I guess an example from the podcast would be The Matrix in terms of films that we've actually discussed on air. But I really like characters who are trying to become someone, sell a version of themselves, or escape the self that they already have, and ask that question, are they discovering who they really are or inventing a persona to survive? Number four, consequences over time. So I think that I'm less interested in one big event and more in what that event does to someone, years later down the road. I think that the real story is often in the aftermath. And then last but not least, systems pressing on the individual. And it could be media, capitalism, celebrity, work, masculinity, whatever, where a protagonist may think they're acting freely, but they're also being shaped by larger forces. Obviously, I think we've talked about 70s political conspiracy thrillers, like the Parallax View, movies like that. There are so many different examples that you could pull for this sort of idea. And I think that gives you room for genre without losing the human part. So yeah, I think that I'd make movies about lonely men making questionable choices in interesting lighting. And I think that would be a really fun thing to do. But yeah, Philip, no, I think that was a really fun question to think about. I wonder what your answer to that would be.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, you're not one of the co-hosts of this episode, and you did not include it in your letter. So I'll ask Mike instead. What's your response to this question?
Yeah, Philip, I really hope you'll write again, man, and tell us what your answer to the question is. I think it's interesting that you wrote such an insightful question and didn't feel driven at all to include even a passing mention of what some of your favorite themes are. It's so interesting. I love this question because I think that the way that we think about it is really emblematic of our differences, both creatively as well as from a taste perspective and in terms of the way that we think about the world. So, if I were someone who made films, I think I would really only think about theme because that tends to be the kind of vantage point from which I approach really anything creative that I'm consuming. But I definitely have a few things that I would return to, and I don't think this will be a surprise to anybody who regularly listens to the podcast because I think I talk about them quite frequently. Perpetrator as erstwhile victim, right, is one that's very important to me. I am a moral relativist. I do not believe in villainy or evil, as it were. I certainly think there are a very small number of people in history who have been particularly evil or villainous in terms of their aims and the things that they've carried out. But in general, people who perpetrate evil are those on whom evil has been perpetrated and are victims of the cycle of abuse that produces abusers. That is something that I believe very strongly about the world. And so I think that would come out in the work that I was doing. I am also not a huge believer in free will from a metaphysical perspective, not something that I think actually exists, although we all obviously have to act as though it does to engage in a healthy pro-social manner with the world around us. And so to Mike's comment about systems pressing on the individual and the illusion of freedom of movement in our life that we all feel is definitely something that I find very interesting and really enjoy exploring in films. And just relativism in general, right? The idea that good and virtue are, to a significant extent, completely relative and in the eye of the beholder. I think that the idea that the villain of every story is the hero of their own story, and just understanding the significance that Vantage Point plays in the way that folks see their actions and the actions of those both with whom they find themselves aligned, but also against whom they find themselves working, is very interesting to me. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think any of this stuff is a surprise to anyone who's listened to the podcast a lot, because in a way that I think reveals my predilections as a consumer of art and an erstwhile creator of art, talk about these themes all the time when I'm analyzing films on the podcast. So really, really good question, Philip. I would love to know what your answer is, man. Please write in and tell us. We'll read it in the next letter episode. Oh, well, great letters today, guys. Mike, do you have anything else you want to say about that?
No, it was fun. Fun variety of letters from our great citizens of De Niro Nation who chose to write into Mike@OurHeroDeNiro.com.
Yeah, and let me just say, in case the subtext is lost on anyone, we don't get as many letters as I think we would like to get. And, Chase wrote like an essay, and we read the entire thing on air. Like, this is your chance to be on Our Hero De Niro. You can write us about literally anything. Unless it's totally stupid or offensive, we're probably going to read it and talk about it.
I wouldn't encourage you to write an essay. I think Chase is kind of like the exception to the rule, But you can write into us. We'd enjoy it.
Mike@OurHeroDeNiro.com. And so with that, I think that is the episode. So just a reminder, there is no roll this week. We rolled during last week's Landshark episode and landed on Machete. And so we will look forward to seeing you all again next week for Machete. But I think with that, I'm just going to read us out. So thank you, Mike, for being here, my co-host, week in and week out. I cannot believe that we've done 80 plus episodes of this thing, considering the uncounted all mic'd ups. But here we are. And of course, I'd like to thank you, loyal citizens of De Niro Nation, for joining us week in and week out, and especially those of you who chose to write us some letters this week, and would invite those who did, as well as those who did not, to write us again at Mike@OurHeroDeNiro.com. You can check out all of our links at OurHeroDeNiro.com, and would invite you to please follow us on Letterboxd. Mike is Mike back at you, and I am Mike the Fab. And please subscribe and rate us on your podcast app of choice. 5 stars only, please. We really need this. And yes, just really hope you guys will join us next week for Machete. Thanks, everybody.
I can't wait.